This is Al Fadi, and today we are going to continue with our discussion concerning what Islam teaches regarding those who are from an African descent. And of course, this is part of our series on the attraction to Islam. And obviously, it's based on the research that Dr. J. Smith has done for his master's degree at Fuller Seminary, where he sent a questionnaire to people who converted to Islam in the East Coast of the United States, and most of them were from African descent. And last episode was really a tough one because it was hard to read these quotations from renowned Islamic scholars describing basically people from an African descent with the most denigrating way that a human being can be described. Today, sadly, we are going to continue at least with a couple of more of these quotations, and then we're going to talk about a very important topic. That's the topic of slavery, at least from an Islamic perspective. With me here to continue to unpack all of that for us is Dr. J. Smith. Dr. J, welcome back.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is hard. This is difficult to go through, but we've got to do so. And I think mainly because Muslims have not let on. They have not been opaque or transparent. They need to be more transparent. This idea that somehow slavery or this denigration of black people is something that only white people do or that Christianity does is not only a misnomer and does us injustice. They're not being transparent about their own past. Islam is by far much more denigrating of black people. This whole idea between white and black, the idea that there's a distinction between this is uniquely introduced by Muslims, not in Christianity and certainly not in the European context. And it's fascinating to me when you look at these quotations. I've given you quite a few up until the 12th century. We're going to now move into 1400s or 13 to 1400s, so the 14th and 15th century, to probably one of the biggest names, and his name is Ibn Khaldun. So it didn't just begin and stop
Exactly.
in the
It's
9th and
showing
10th century.
progressively that it continues.
It continues right up. We're now into the 15th century. Ibn Khaldun, one of the greatest names of scholars in Islam.
Who wrote the introduction of Ibn Khaldun.
That's right. Let's go ahead and see what he has to say about black people. And this is what he says. Therefore, the Negro nation are, as a rule, submissive to slavery because Negroes have little that is essentially human and have attributes that are quite similar to those of dumb animals, as we have stated. That's his first quote. He goes on and says in another quote, in a completely different place, he says, beyond known people of black West Africa to the south, there is no civilization in the proper sense. There are only humans who are closer to dumb animals than to rational beings. They live in thickets and caves and eat herbs and unprepared grain. They frequently eat each other. They cannot be considered human beings. Now, I mean, that's just awful. That is just, to me, it's horrendous to even come across these kind of quotes. We've got to do so. It's important that we do so. And then we get back to this idea of Arab superiority, that somehow we as Muslims are superior to all the rest. Even other people, including brown people and white people, Arabs are somehow at the top of the rung. This is not being taught in many of your Muslim mosques. They're not saying so. So let's go back to Al-Tabari. Let's go back to the 10th century. 923 is when he died. Look and see what Al-Tabari says about the Arabs. And I quote, Arabs are the most noble people in lineage, the most prominent and best in deeds. We were the first to respond to the call of the Prophet. We are Allah's helpers and the viziers of his messenger. We fight people until they believe in Allah. He who believes in Allah and his messenger has protected his life and possessions from us. As for one who disbelieves, we will fight him forever in Allah's cause. Killing him is a small matter to us. So here you have Al-Tabari, who is the one who introduces the tafsir and introduces the tahriq, the first to do so. Look and see what he says about black people, about Arab people, and about anybody else that is from other races. They are to be brought to Allah even if killing them is needed. Ibn Taymiyyah, probably the godfather of Islam, the one who defined Islam, who died in 1328. So we're talking about the 14th century. And he is the one that really defines what it means to be an Arab. He says, a man married a maid slave who bore him a child. Would that child be free or would he be an owned slave? Her child, whom she bore from him, would be the property of her master, according to all the imams, heads of the 4 Islamic schools of law, because the child follows the status of his mother in freedom or slavery. If the child is not of the race of Arabs, then he is definitely an owned slave according to the scholars. But the scholars disputed his status among themselves if he was from the Arabs, whether he must be enslaved or not, because when Aisha, Muhammad's wife, had a maid slave who was an Arab, Muhammad said to Aisha, "Set this maid free because she is from the children of Ishmael." So you can see they're even arguing about what is superior, what is inferior. This is the father of the Islamic religion, of the one who actually defined what Islam is.
And this is part of his collection, most likely, that is known as Al-Fatawi, which has to do with interpretation, religious interpretations.
Okay, now here's what's interesting. I'm going to then go to and talk about Muhammad himself. When you look at Muhammad and look at the descriptions of Muhammad, it's almost comical, because you can really see that everything about Muhammad is anything but black. They really make him, they put him together. And when you actually look at the quotations from all these different traditions, just take it. I'm just going to list them off one by one. Look at Muhammad's color according to Al-Bukhari, volume 4, book 56, number 767. He has white legs. According to volume 4, books 8, according to Bukhari, he has white shanks. According to Ibn Dawud, 3206, book 20, hadith 3200, he has white forearms. According to Al-Bukhari, volume 8 again, the same book before, he has white armpits. According to Al-Bukhari, volume 9, he has a white abdomen. According to Sahih Muslim, 1803, volume 32, hadith number 152, he has a white belly. According to Al-Dab al-Mufrad, in his book on the hadith 37, he has white skin. According to Sahih Muslim, in his hadith of 2340, book 43, he has a handsome white face. According to Ibn Dawud and Al-Bukhari, and twice in Al-Bukhari, in fact 3 times in Al-Bukhari, and also in Sahih Muslim, he was a white man. So let's repeat that. He has white leg, white shanks, white forearm, white armpit, white abdomen, white belly, white skin, handsome white face. You're starting to get a narrative that's going on here.
Muhammad must be from the north.
He must be from the north. He must be of the European tribe.
Right.
So not completely, very absolutely white or brown, according to Bukhari, volume 4. So Ibn Musa said this. Ahmad ibn Abi Sulaiman, the companion of Sahun, said, anyone who says that the Prophet was black should be killed.
Wow.
So,
and here's the thing, by the way, you can take this either as a literal description of him or as a compliment to him. Either way, they chose the color white to describe him.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, we said we need to do this. We've got to go back to slavery itself. We need to go back to the historical record.
Right.
And when you look at the historical record, we need to look and show that the history of slavery in Islam is not at all being taught in our schools. It's not being taught certainly in the United States. It's not been taught in Europe anywhere. And when you think of slavery, almost invariably, what you think is European slavery. You think of Atlantic slavery. And of course, that is part of our history. But that Atlantic slavery started in 1400 AD and went up until 1800 AD and was shut down first, starting in Britain with William Wilberforce, who was a Christian and did so because of his Christian ideals. And that's why in 1809, I think is when he shut it down, and by 1833, it was then eradicated in Britain. Britain was the first country in the world to eradicate slavery. We had a war about it in 1850s here in the United States, and all the European powers just one after another shut down slavery. That was that 400-year period, a black mark in our history. And that's why it's in our history books. We talk about it. We have entire degrees on slavery. And that's why invariably, if you're an Afro-American living in America, you think that the only slavery exists is Atlantic slavery and only had to do with them and Europeans. That's why it's so easy for this narrative to get across and why so many of them are attracted by this. The problem is you need to go back and ask, there are not just that slavery, there's a much bigger slavery, a much greater slavery that is not talked about, and that's Islamic slavery. Now, Islamic slavery was started way back in 624, that's the 7th century, and continues already up until today. It still continues today. I mean, Baroness Cox went to North Africa, she went to Sudan, and she actually went to slave houses and on camera bought slaves, showing that she could still buy slaves today. This is just about 15 years ago she did this. So it still continues today in the 21st century. What's interesting is when you look at the numbers, of slaves that went across to Africa, from Africa over to the Americas. They were all from the western coast of Africa, some from the north part of Africa, but they all went over to the Americas. According to the latest statistics, John Azuma, who did his doctoral thesis on this, he said there were between 11 to 17 million slaves that went from the west coast to the Americas. Those who went from the East Coast, now remember, East Coast, hold on a minute. What slaves went to the East Coast? What do you think Zanzibar is? What is Mombasa in Kenya? Zanzibar, it was a slave island. That's the East Coast. Where did they all go? They didn't go to the West. No, they went where? Right up north. According to the statistics that come out, he said there were anywhere from 17 to 20 million slaves that went up from the East Coast. And he then went on to say, where is their progeny today? We know where the European slaves, the European slave progeny are because they brought whole families over. And they're still all over in Brazil. And they're all over the Mediterranean. They're all over the United States. We have 30 million of their progeny in the United States. We've even had a president who comes from their lineage. But where are the progeny they're supposed to have from the 70 to 20 million? There should be 120 million of their progeny. We can't find any of them. Robert Hughes, in Fraying of America, February 3, 1992, made this quote, and I want to read it. The African slave trade as such, the black traffic, was an Arab invention developed by traders with the enthusiastic collaboration of black African ones, institutionalized with the most unrelenting brutality, centuries before the white man appeared on the African continent, and continuing long after the slave market in North America was finally crushed. Nothing in the writings of the Prophet Muhammad forbids slavery, which is why it became such an Arab-dominated business. And the slave traffic could not have existed without the wholehearted cooperation of African tribal states built on the supply of captives generated by the relentless wars. The image promulgated by pop history fictions like Roots of white slavers bursting with cutlass and musket into the settled lives of peaceful African villages is very far from the historical truth. A marketing system had been in place for centuries, and its supply was controlled by Africans, nor did it simply vanish with abolition. Slave markets supplying the Arab Emirates were still operating in Djibouti in the 1950s, and since 1960, the slave trade has flourished in Mauritania and the Sudan. There are still reports of chattel slavery in northern Nigeria, Rwanda, and Niger. So these are all the areas that they have. Now, we need to stop there. I want to end one last segment on this because it's important that we bring it all together and conclude. What do we mean about brotherhood? Where really is there brotherhood with statistics like this, with quotations like this?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for following along. And I want to apologize again for some of the tough quotations that we have to share with you, but it was incumbent upon us to show you from the mouth of these scholars or even the teachings that are found in Islam, how do they view those who are from an African descent? Until next episode, God bless. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. And ring the bell so you will be notified when we release new content. Our mission is to reach Muslims with the gospel of Jesus Christ and help Christians engage with their Muslim neighbors. If you want to join us in this life-changing work, please support us on patreon.com/CIRA International or just click on the link below.